Hi, I'm Maureen. I used to think love in a family meant protection, honesty, loyalty. But then my son's wife told me that living apart would save us, that it was for my own peace. It wasn't peace, it was a plan. They called it space, while secretly forging my name, draining my accounts, and prepping my granddaughter to forget I ever mattered. And when her little girl, not mine by blood, but mine by heart, got closer to me than they expected, everything unraveled. Why would the people you raised choose to erase you like that? And what do you do when silence stops being safe? Let me tell you what happened next. Breakfast had always been a quiet ritual in our home. Toast crisped just right, eggs gently scrambled, a mug of dark roast warming my hands. But that morning, the silence sat heavier than usual. Elias avoided my eyes, while Sarah hummed softly, oblivious in her own little world as she drew on a napkin. Something felt rehearsed, like a play I hadn't been cast in. Rose joined late, hair too perfect for a weekend, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She poured herself coffee and took a seat across from me. "Maureen," she said, folding her hands with practiced calm, "we've been thinking, maybe it's time to try something new, a different living arrangement." I blinked. "Different?" She nodded, still smiling. "Living apart together. It's a modern idea. We'd still be close, but with some space. Emotional breathing room. It's healthier, they say. Less conflict." My fork hovered above my plate. "You want me to move out?" No, not like that," she rushed. "Just, maybe you could live nearby? Somewhere with people your age, activities, support?" She sipped her coffee. "For everyone's well-being." I didn't respond right away. I watched the butter melt on my toast, the way it slid off the edge like something trying to disappear. "Space," I finally said. "From what exactly?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Just the tension. You've seemed tired lately, overwhelmed." Tired. That was her word for it. Not the countless nights I stayed up with Sarah when she was teething. Not the hours I spent helping Elias manage the bills when he got laid off last year. Overwhelmed. I nodded slowly, keeping my voice even. "I'll think about it." That night, Sarah brought me tea, chamomile with honey, just the way I liked it. She called me Grandma 3 times in 10 minutes. Her hugs lingered longer than usual. She even offered to brush my hair, something she hadn't done since she was 8. It wasn't just affection, it was practiced, taught, a performance. And from the hallway, I saw Rose watching us, arms crossed, a hint of satisfaction on her face. That look didn't belong to someone worried about my well-being. That was a look of control, of a plan unfolding just as she'd laid it out. I said nothing. I let the tea grow cold in my hands and told Sarah she was sweet, the way children are when they don't know they're being used. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. "Space," she'd said. All I could see was an erasure, not loud, not cruel, just methodical. Quiet. Like chalk being wiped from a blackboard until nothing remained. And then I heard it. A voice that wasn't meant for me to hear. It was a quiet Tuesday night, the kind where nothing feels remarkable until it does. I'd just finished folding a load of laundry and was heading down the hallway, arms full of freshly warmed towels. As I neared the guest room, my room, now relegated to the role of guest, I heard Rose's voice through the half-closed door. I hadn't meant to linger, but something in her tone stopped me cold. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't hiding. It was as if she didn't expect me to hear, or maybe didn't care. "She's old. She won't notice. Just handle the transfer quietly." That one sentence. A single string of words that shifted everything inside me. She wasn't talking about moving furniture. She was talking about me, my name, my home, my life. Erasing it all like wiping chalk off a school board. Quietly, as if I were too worn to matter, too dull to resist. I stood there, my spine stiff but my feet rooted. Her voice faded into other details. "The papers are ready. and "Just need Elias to sign." But the words didn't register. All I could hear was the quiet cruelty in her voice. That kind of cruelty doesn't scream. It seeps. I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. I turned around, walked back to my room, and set the towels down without a sound. My hands trembled only slightly as I opened the drawer to retrieve my journal. I hadn't written in months, but the pen felt familiar in my fingers. I wrote down every word I remembered, line by line. "If they think I'm invisible," I scribbled, "I will listen longer and record." The next morning, the kitchen routine resumed like nothing had cracked the night before. I made eggs, buttered toast, refilled the coffee pot. Elias mumbled thanks. Rose was glued to her phone, thumbs twitching. Her coffee sat untouched, like she was waiting for something, or someone, to react. I said nothing. I watched. Sarah plopped into her chair, humming again. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, cocking her head. I smiled gently. "Of course, sweetheart. I'm just thinking a lot lately." That was true, thinking more clearly than I had in weeks. That evening, once the dishes were washed and the house settled into its artificial quiet, I took a small key from the back of my nightstand and unlocked the metal box at the bottom of my closet. It had been years since I'd opened it. Inside were old files, birth certificates, marriage papers, insurance records, and the deed to the house. The original. I held it up under the yellow glow of my bedside lamp. My eyes went straight to the signature line. Something didn't feel right. I ran my finger across the ink, familiar, yet wrong. It wasn't my hand. The slope of the R, the curl of the G, too neat, too rehearsed. "That's not my handwriting," I whispered. I stared at the paper for a long moment. They thought I wouldn't check. They thought I wouldn't see. "You think I'm old," I said aloud, the words like steel in my throat. "That doesn't mean I'm blind." I stayed up most of the night after finding that signature. It haunted me. Each swirl of the pen, every false loop in the letters. By morning, my eyes ached, but my mind was clear. I pulled out my own copy of the deed from the safety box again, laid it side by side with the version I'd found in the kitchen drawer 2 nights ago. The differences weren't loud, but they screamed to me all the same. The R in Ridgeway curved too gently. The tail of the Y ended with a flourish I'd never used in my life. This wasn't sloppiness. It was calculated mimicry. My gut churned, but I kept steady hands. I reached into my desk drawer and opened the little cedar box I hadn't touched since Elias got married. There, nestled among old thank you notes and faded ribbons, was the fountain pen I gave him as a wedding gift. Black lacquer, silver trim. It used to be mine when I practiced law full-time. Only it wasn't in its place. That afternoon, when Rose took Sarah to ballet class and Elias was out at work, I went into their shared office. I had no intention of snooping. I wasn't searching for secrets, only truth. And there it was, carelessly tossed in the pen holder on Rose's desk. My old fountain pen, the same one that signed marriage licenses, custody agreements, and trust documents. The same one now used to steal a home out from under the woman who paid for it. I picked it up, clicked the cap, pressed the nib against a scrap of paper, and watched the familiar ink flow. My fingers shook, but not from age. Back at the kitchen table, I lined up the papers, tracing every signature. My legal training, long dormant, kicked back in. I noted timing, phrasing, even the notary's details. Whoever had filed this had done so with intent. They didn't just file it. They timed it to when I was away visiting my sister in San Antonio. They waited until I was gone to execute the paperwork, and Elias had signed right next to it, as if he were clueless. As if this were just another harmless form Rose asked him to look over. By Sunday, I had enough in my notes to know this wasn't misunderstanding. It was malice. We gathered for dinner that evening, just the 4 of us. Roast chicken, overcooked carrots, biscuits from the can. Elias's idea of cooking. Rose poured wine like everything was normal. She smiled too wide. "You've been so quiet lately, Maureen," she said. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, slicing my chicken without looking up. "Just tired, I guess." Elias grinned, unaware. "Rose handled all the paperwork for the refinancing so smoothly, you know. I barely had to do anything." I smiled at my plate. "That sounds like her." Rose glanced at me, then at Elias. "Well, I just figured, less hassle, right? You don't need to worry about those details." "No," I said, sipping water. "Not when they're already signed." She choked a little, covered it with a cough. Elias didn't notice. I finished my meal, barely tasting anything. It all felt hollow. Even Sarah was subdued, sensing the tension like kids always do. After dinner, I took my files and locked them in a new metal case I bought that morning, one with a code only I knew. I updated my will, removed Elias as executor, removed Rose from everything. As I turned the key, I whispered, "They forged my name." Then I paused. "But they don't know what my name still means." Saturday mornings used to mean coffee on the porch and crossword puzzles spread across my lap. But now, I filled them with silence and small routines, watering the garden, snipping dead leaves, pretending everything around me was still mine. Sarah skipped beside me, holding the watering can with both hands like it was precious cargo. "Grandma," she said as we reached the roses, "why is Mom changing your room?" I paused, pulling weeds from the base of the planter. "Changing it?" "Yeah," she chirped. "She said the new curtains are for a guest room, and she moved your dresser." I brushed soil from my fingers and straightened up. "Well," I said slowly, "maybe she just wanted a new look." Sarah frowned. "But it's your room." I bent again, distracting myself with a patch of dry soil that didn't need tending. "Things change, sweetheart. People redecorate all the time." She tilted the can, drenching a fern. "She said you won't be here much longer anyway." The words landed heavier than any lie I'd found on a page. My hands stopped, my breath held, and I turned just enough to look at her without showing my face fully. "She said that?" I asked quietly. Sarah nodded, innocent and proud to be included in adult conversations. "She said it's time you had your own space, that living here makes you sad." I set the watering can down carefully. "Thank you for telling me, honey," I said. "Always tell Grandma what you feel. It's important." She smiled and moved on to the next pot. I stayed kneeling longer than I needed to, pretending to tie her shoe even though it didn't need tying. I wasn't crying. I'd stopped doing that years ago when I realized tears didn't fix much. But something inside me did crack, just slightly, a soundless splinter under pressure. That evening, after Sarah had gone to bed and the house grew still, I lit a single lamp and opened my journal again. The same one from the night I overheard Rose. My handwriting was sharper now, less shaky. "They've begun using my granddaughter's mouth to carry their message," I wrote, "and they think I'll go quietly." I sketched a new timeline, dotted dates, circled the day Elias lost his job, and the day Rose started sleeping in. I drew arrows linking statements, signatures, and silence. I used to build cases for clients. Now I was building one for myself. "My silence will soon become a statement," I wrote. I placed the journal beside my bed, just as I always did. Then I laid back, stared at the ceiling, and replayed Sarah's voice again. She wasn't cruel, she didn't know, but the message was clear. Outside my door, I heard hushed tones again, Elias and Rose. Low murmurs, careful pauses. "Do you think she suspects?" I turned off my lamp, let the darkness swallow the room. "I suspect everything now." The next morning, I waited until Rose passed by the kitchen before I let my spoon clatter into the sink and muttered, just loud enough, "Wait! What day is it again?" My tone was soft, like a confused murmur. I turned. let my face rest in that limbo between puzzled and passive. Rose peeked back in, a quick glance over her shoulder. "Did you say something, Maureen?" I blinked twice and furrowed my brow. Was it Wednesday or Thursday? I can't remember anymore. She paused, then smiled a little too brightly. "Maybe we should schedule a checkup soon, just to be safe. I'm sure the doctor can help sort through all this forgetfulness." I nodded slowly, giving her exactly what she wanted. "Maybe I'm forgetting things lately." She looked pleased. It took everything in me not to smile. That afternoon, while Sarah helped me load dishes after dinner, Rose leaned against the counter and spoke in that syrupy voice she used when she was trying to sound nurturing. "You'll have your own room again, sweetheart," she said to Sarah, "once Grandma moves into that nice place we talked about." Sarah paused, her little fingers tightening around the dish towel. "What place?" Rose didn't miss a beat. "The one with the garden and bingo nights. It's just for people like Grandma. You'll get your room back." I turned from the sink, my hands still wet, and looked directly at Sarah, then at Rose. "That sounds like a big plan," I said. "Have you already picked the place?" Rose opened her mouth and closed it again, the pink draining from her face. I mean, we were just talking about options. Nothing's been decided." "Oh, of course," I said gently, drying my hands. "Just options." She knew. In that moment, she knew she'd said too much. But I gave her nothing. No anger, no accusation. Just a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. That night, in the quiet that followed a storm of fake calm, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. I wrote with steady hands. "She mistook my silence for surrender," I penned. "She mistook my calm for compliance." I listed everything Sarah had said, everything Rose had let slip. I wrote down the date, the time, where we were standing. I wrote it like a lawyer would, like I'd never stopped being one. Then I slipped the page into an envelope and wrote across it in bold ink, "In case I forget." I sealed it and placed it in the drawer beside my bed, next to my will, next to the documents I had been updating piece by piece. When you're 70, people expect slowness. They don't expect preparation. The following morning, I waited until the house settled into its weekday rhythm. Sarah off to school, Rose humming in the laundry room, Elias nowhere in sight. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang twice. "Ross McGill speaking." "Ross," I said. "It's Maureen Ridgway." There was a beat, then a chuckle on the other end. "Well, that's a name I haven't heard in a while." "I need someone who remembers how I think when I'm angry." Ross didn't miss a beat. "I remember. When you're angry, you're surgical." I smiled, letting the silence sit between us for a moment. "Then it's time to scrub in." Downtown Houston hadn't changed much. Same coffee shop on the corner, same uneven brick path up to Ross McGill's office. The receptionist greeted me like I'd only missed 1 week, not 10 years. Ross walked in moments later, sleeves rolled to the elbow, graying more than I remembered. He didn't smile until I laid the folder on his desk. "I need your eyes," I said. Inside were the fake signatures, copies of the deed, printed text messages, a page torn from my journal. I slid each one forward slowly, like playing cards in a hand I was ready to win. He read silently, then leaned back and sighed. "Maureen, this isn't a family squabble. This is fraud. Intentional. Documented." He turned toward his computer. "Let me make a call." I sat still, listening as he reached someone at a title office. He spoke in the tone lawyers use when they already know the answer, but want it confirmed on record. When he hung up, his jaw tightened. "They filed for a secondary mortgage, using the forged deed. If your name wasn't flagged, it'd be done by now." I nodded once. "So it's not just about pushing me out emotionally." Ross leaned forward. "No, this is about property, cash, and control." That evening, I drove to my local bank. The teller, Linda, recognized me immediately. "Maureen, haven't seen you in a while." We sat in her little cubicle, just like old times. I pulled out a slip of paper. This account. Can I see the last 60 days? She raised an eyebrow but typed it in. Looks like regular transfers. Every Friday, about 2,000 each week, and some lump sums. You sure you authorized this? No, I said flatly. I didn't. Linda's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Want me to flag it? Not yet, I said. Just print it all. I need everything. She handed me a folder without asking more. By the time I got home, dinner was halfway done. Elias was setting the table while Rose stirred something on the stove. I stepped in like nothing had shifted. Smells nice, I said. What's the occasion? No occasion, Elias said. Rose just wanted to cook. Been handling everything lately. Bills, appointments. Rose smiled like it was her birthday. I figured you could use the help. I placed my purse down. Maybe I should take a second look at those accounts. You know, for peace of mind. Her hand paused mid-stir. Oh? She said lightly. Sure. Whatever makes you feel secure. I nodded, taking a seat. Exactly? The meal tasted like chalk. After dishes were done and the house had quieted, I sat at my desk. I froze all joint activity, changed passwords, filed a fraud alert, transferred everything under my name alone. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Ross. All updated. You're now my legal rep on every financial and property document. He responded one word. Understood. I closed the drawer, the click louder than it needed to be. They wanted me quiet, I whispered to the dark. They should have asked how quiet lawyers get when they're done being polite. I invited them all for dinner the following Friday. Elias, Rose, Sarah, and a few relatives close enough to matter, but distant enough to not pick sides. I told them it was to clarify some family plans. The wording was vague enough to bait curiosity and precise enough to lure them in without protest. The dining room hadn't looked that polished in months. I made roast, the kind Elias used to request when he still lived like he needed me. Sarah folded the napkins. Rose brought a bottle of red and wore a silk blouse like it was a networking event. Elias, jittery, tapped his fork against his glass. I served the meal as if none of us were about to suffocate. Ross arrived last. He brought nothing but a briefcase and a smile too small to be polite. Once everyone had taken a bite or two, I cleared my throat lightly. Thank you all for coming. I thought we could take a moment and clear up some misunderstandings. Rose froze mid-sip. Misunderstandings? I nodded and reached beneath the table, pulling out a manila envelope. I've been doing some organizing. You know how it is. Getting older, tidying up affairs. I passed copies down both ends of the table. Inside were printed pages of a false medical report, a document suggesting early signs of mental decline, dated 3 months ago. The file had been attached to a bank inquiry with my name at the top and Rose's handwriting scribbled across the bottom. Elias squinted at the page. What is this? A fabrication, Ross said plainly. Submitted to influence legal authority over property and finances. Rose laughed. That's ridiculous. I didn't flinch. Is it? I reached into my purse and placed my phone on the table. I tapped play. It was Rose's voice, clear, crisp, calm. She won't be around much longer. The sooner we file, the better. Elias will sign anything I put in front of him. There was a pause. Then the sound of her laughter. The room went so still, I could hear the second hand on the kitchen clock clicking. Elias lowered his head. Ross stayed silent. Rose sat, mouth parted like her words had betrayed her faster than her thoughts could defend. Sarah looked up from her plate. Why would you say that, Mom? Rose didn't answer. I turned to Sarah. Because sometimes, I said softly, grown-ups don't deserve to be believed without proof. My voice wasn't bitter. It was precise. Then I stood. From my bag, I placed 2 sealed envelopes in front of Elias and Rose. Formal notice, I said, of financial fraud, identity misrepresentation, and a guardianship petition. Elias finally looked up. Guardianship? For Sarah, I said, until the court decides what's best for her. You can't do this, Rose whispered. I already have. I turned to the others. Thank you for dinner. And I walked out. Ross followed a moment later, briefcase in hand, coat over his arm. No one else moved. The room had fallen too quiet to speak. The courthouse smelled like dust and time. Sarah held my hand tightly as we walked through the double doors. Ross walked beside us, steady, silent, his briefcase clutched like a shield. Rose and Elias were already seated in the courtroom, Elias fidgeting, Rose trying to look unfazed, but missing the mark. I didn't look at either of them. I looked straight ahead. When the judge entered, the room stood. When he sat, my world began to shift. The petition was acknowledged quickly. Fraud, financial manipulation, guardianship. Ross rose, calm as ever, and approached the bench. He laid out every document with surgical precision. Bank records, notarized copies, false medical forms, and finally, the audio file. He didn't need theatrics. The paper spoke for itself. The truth didn't tremble. When the judge finally turned to me, I stood. I was never confused, I said. I was cornered. No one said a word after that. The judge cleared his throat and asked to speak with Sarah. She approached with a quiet courage only children seem to carry. He leaned forward and asked her where she would feel the safest. Grandma's house, she said softly. I always feel safe there. He smiled gently. And why is that, Sarah? She looked down at her shoes, then back up. Mom says I'm too loyal to Grandma, but Grandma never made me feel like I was in the way. Even the bailiff turned his eyes away. The judge leaned back, nodded slowly, and looked at the pile of evidence once more. Then he spoke the words I had waited months to hear. Guardianship is granted to Ms. Ridgway. All documents executed under coercion or deception are hereby nullified. This court finds the actions of Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez to be ethically questionable and bordering on criminal misconduct. Rose gasped. Elias didn't lift his head. I said nothing. I reached for Sarah's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. The courtroom emptied slowly. Whispers followed us out the door like shadows, but none dared meet my eyes. At the clerk's office, I signed the new documents. Guardianship confirmation, revocation of power of attorney. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming something I had let slip for too long. This is what my name really means, I said to the clerk, who nodded with a kind of reverence. Outside, Sarah skipped ahead on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun catching the edge of her braid. I watched her for a moment before Ross stepped beside me. You did it, he said. No, I replied. I proved it. They did it to themselves. And still, something inside me ached. Not for what I lost, but for how easily people I loved had tried to pretend I was never there. The kitchen was quiet again, but the quiet had changed. It wasn't the silence of suspicion or surveillance. It was peace. Sarah stood beside me at the stove, flipping pancakes with more confidence than she'd had a month ago. She was humming a tune from school, her hair still messy from sleep. Add more blueberries this time, she said, grinning. Grandma's special. We laughed. I passed her the bowl, and she poured with a seriousness only 10-year-olds could muster. Outside, the morning sun stretched across the porch. I saw the package as soon as I opened the door to let in the breeze. Plain, brown, no return address. Just my name, written too carefully to be anything but hers. The letter was short, defensive, laced with half-hearted apologies and long-winded excuses. Rose blamed pressure, bad advice, my stubborn pride. She signed it with love, which stung more than anything else. I read it twice, set it on the counter, then tore it in half, then into quarters. Then I set fire to the pieces in the kitchen sink and watched the smoke curl into the air like ghosts I was no longer willing to entertain. Some things don't deserve to be stored. Later that afternoon, I sat on the garden bench, the one Elias built years ago when he still thought sweat meant love. The breeze was soft. The rosemary bushes needed trimming, But I let them be. Sarah came out with a notebook, plopped beside me, and opened to a page covered in pink pen. "I wrote you something," she said. She read slowly, carefully, her voice small but sure. It was a poem about grandmothers, about trust, about homes that didn't always have walls. The last line read, "My home is where your heart is." I didn't speak. I just pulled her close. She laid her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I let my chest fully rise with a deep breath. Not long after, Callista knocked on the side gate and entered with a dish covered in foil. "I brought peach cobbler," she said, setting it down. "Still warm." We sat out back while Sarah watered the hydrangeas. Callista sipped her iced tea and said, "Being right doesn't always feel as good as it should." I nodded. "No, but peace is still better than pretending." She smiled at that. "That it is." When the sun dipped low and the dishes were put away, I sat at my desk and opened my journal one last time. "I was never the one who left," I wrote. "I was the one they tried to erase." Then, below it, after a long pause, I added, "And yet I'm still here, stronger, seen." I closed the book. The house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like mine again. Looking back, I've learned this. Sometimes the people who smile across the dinner table are the ones tightening the knots beneath it. But surviving isn't just about catching the lies. It's about remembering who you were before they tried to write you out. If you've ever felt replaced, erased, or doubted, I want you to know your story still matters. You are not a burden. You are not disposable. So tell me, have you ever had to reclaim your voice in a room that tried to silence it? Have you ever stood your ground when your own family made you feel like you didn't belong? I'd love to hear your story. Leave me a comment below. Press 1 if this resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't quite land, I want to know that too. Share your thoughts, your truths, your questions. That's how we heal. And if you want to keep walking through stories that reflect real life, real pain, and real strength, subscribe to the channel. There's more coming. Let's face it all together.